If you've ever planted a perennial in a pot, watched it thrive all summer, and then disappear after winter, you're not alone. Most gardeners assume the plant failed, but more often than not, the plant wasn't the problem. The conditions were, the container was, or the plant simply wasn't the right match for where it was growing. And that's frustrating because one of the biggest reasons people switch to perennials is to stop starting over every spring. Think about it. Every year, gardeners head to the garden center, buy new annuals, enjoy them for a few months, then repeat the process all over again the following season. It's a cycle. It costs money. It takes time. And eventually, many people start asking the same question. Is there a better way? The answer is often yes. The right perennial can return year after year, grow stronger over time, and provide far more value than a plant that's replaced every season. Some can be divided into multiple plants. Some thrive with very little maintenance, and some keep performing long after annuals would have been thrown away and replaced. Today, we're looking at 7 of the best lazy perennials for containers. These are plants that can save you money, reduce maintenance, and help you build containers that improve with age instead of starting from scratch every spring. But we're also going one step further, because one question keeps coming up among gardeners. Why do some container perennials come back every year while others seem to disappear after one winter? As we go through this list, we'll look at why each plant is worth growing and some of the common mistakes that prevent gardeners from getting the long-term results they're hoping for. Let's start with one of the most recognizable plants on the list, lavender. Few perennials are as popular as lavender. Its fragrant flowers, silver foliage, and ability to attract pollinators have made it a favorite in gardens across the country. And once established, it's surprisingly low maintenance. That's one reason lavender works so well in containers. It brings color, it brings fragrance, and unlike annual flowers, it doesn't require you to start over every year. That's the real advantage. You're not planting for one season, you're planting for years of enjoyment. Another reason lavender performs well in containers is drainage. Lavender hates wet soil. In many gardens, especially those with heavier soils, excess moisture becomes the biggest challenge. Containers make it much easier to control those conditions. In fact, many gardeners have better success growing lavender in pots than they do in the ground. Now here's something worth knowing. A lot of people assume lavender dies because winter temperatures become too cold. Sometimes that's true, but very often, the bigger problem is moisture. Wet roots sitting in cold soil for long periods can cause trouble even when the plant is capable of handling the temperature itself. That's why drainage matters so much. If you live in an area with wet winters, focusing on drainage is often more important than worrying about the cold. Get that right, and lavender can reward you for years with very little effort. If lavender proves a sun-loving perennial can thrive in containers for years, the next plant proves the same thing is possible in shade. Hosta. Hostas have earned their reputation for a reason. They're reliable, they're adaptable, and they often become more impressive with each passing season. While many plants struggle in shaded areas, hostas seem perfectly at home there. Their large leaves create instant impact, making containers look full, established, and attractive even when flowers aren't the main focus. That's part of what makes them such a smart long-term choice. They provide months of visual interest. And unlike annuals that disappear at the end of the season, hostas continue returning year after year. But perhaps their biggest advantage is the value they create over time. A mature hosta isn't just one plant. Eventually, it can become several. As hostas grow, many gardeners divide them and create additional plants without spending another dollar at the garden center. That's the kind of return annual flowers simply can't provide. And it fits perfectly with the idea behind today's list. Plants. Benefit for years. Now, let's address one of the most common questions gardeners ask. Will hostas survive winter in a container? In many cases, absolutely. Hostas are surprisingly cold, hardy, and often tougher than people expect. The bigger concern usually isn't the plant itself. It's the condition of the container. Proper drainage remains important, especially during periods of freezing and thawing. Waterlogged soil creates problems that healthy roots don't need. But when grown in a suitable container with good drainage, hostas can return year after year with very little effort. And that's exactly what makes them one of the most dependable container perennials you can grow. If you're enjoying practical gardening advice that helps you save money and avoid costly mistakes, Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every week, we share simple strategies that help gardeners grow more, spend less, and get better results from the space they already have. Now, let's look at a perennial that may be one of the easiest plants on this entire list. Sedum. If there were an award for low-maintenance container plants, Sedum would be a strong contender. This is the kind of plant that succeeds where many others struggle. It handles heat. It tolerates dry conditions. And once established, it asks for very little attention. That's a big reason so many gardeners keep it around for years. Unlike plants that seem to need constant watering and monitoring, Sedum is built to be resilient. Its thick leaves store water, allowing it to handle periods of drought much better than many other container plants. And that's important because containers dry out faster than garden beds. A few hot days, a missed watering, a busy week, those small mistakes can cause problems for many plants. Sedum is much more forgiving. That doesn't mean you can ignore it completely, but it does mean occasional mistakes are less likely to become major setbacks. And for many gardeners, that's exactly the kind of reliability they're looking for. Another reason Sedum belongs on this list is longevity. You're not planting it for a single season. You're planting it for years of value. With the right conditions, Sedum can continue returning with very little intervention from the gardener. Now let's connect that to a question many people ask. What if you live somewhere with intense summer heat? This is where Sedum often shines. Many varieties perform exceptionally well in sunny locations and tolerate conditions that would stress more demanding plants. That's one reason they're so popular in containers placed on patios, driveways, and other exposed areas. If your goal is simple, plant it, enjoy it, and spend less time worrying about it. Sedum is one of the strongest choices on this list. If Sedum earns its place through simplicity, the next perennial earns its place through long-term value. Daylily. Some plants give you one good season. Daylilies can give you years of enjoyment. That's one reason they've remained popular with gardeners for generations. They're dependable, they're adaptable, and once established, they're surprisingly easy to maintain. Like several plants on today's list, daylilies return year after year. But what makes them especially valuable is what happens over time. They grow, they expand, and eventually, many gardeners divide them to create additional plants. That's where daylilies separate themselves from many other choices. A single plant today can become multiple plants in the future. That's real long-term value. Instead of repeatedly buying replacements, you're increasing the return from your original investment. And that's exactly what plant once, done forever, is all about. Daylilies are also known for their adaptability. They succeed in a wide range of climates and growing conditions, which is one reason they're often recommended to newer gardeners. They're forgiving, and forgiving plants tend to stay in gardens for a very long time. Another common question gardeners ask is, how do I get more value from the plants I already own? Daylilies provide one of the best answers. As they mature, division becomes possible. One healthy plant can become several. More containers, more flowers, and more value without another trip to the garden center. That's difficult for annuals to compete with. And if daylilies earn their place through long-term value, the next perennial earns its place through long-lasting color. Catmint. One challenge with many flowering plants is that the show doesn't last very long. The blooms arrive. Everything looks great. Then a few weeks later, much of that color is gone. Catmint is different. It's known for producing long-lasting displays while remaining remarkably easy to grow. That's a powerful combination, because the goal isn't simply keeping a plant alive. The goal is continuing to enjoy it, season after season, year after year. Catmint helps do both. Once established, it handles dry conditions relatively well and asks for very little maintenance. It also attracts pollinators, making it a favorite among gardeners who want to support bees and butterflies while adding color to their containers. Another reason catmint stands out is how well it responds to simple care. A light trim after flowering often encourages fresh growth and additional blooms. That's a small amount of effort for a long period of reward. And that brings us to another point many gardeners care about. It's not enough for a perennial to survive. People want it to perform. They want containers that continue looking attractive through much of the growing season. That's where catmint shines. It combines durability with visual impact. And that's one reason so many gardeners continue growing it year after year. Or better yet, Plant it once and enjoy the benefits for years to come. If you're getting value from today's list, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Every week, we share practical gardening strategies designed to help you save money, avoid common mistakes, and get more value from every plant you grow. Now let's look at the final 2 perennials on today's list, plants that solve challenges many container gardeners face every season. Now let's look at the final 2 perennials on today's list. Coneflower. Few perennials have built a stronger reputation for attracting pollinators than coneflower. It's one of those plants that seems to do several things well at the same time. It produces colorful blooms, it attracts bees and butterflies, and once established, it requires very little maintenance. That's a combination many gardeners appreciate, especially those looking for plants that continue earning their place year after year. Coneflower isn't popular simply because it's attractive. It's popular because it's dependable. When gardeners find a plant that consistently performs well, they tend to keep growing it. And coneflower has earned that reputation across a wide range of gardens. Another reason it works so well in containers is its ability to handle sunny locations. Many gardeners struggle to find plants that can tolerate long hours of direct sunlight while continuing to perform season after season. Coneflower is often one of the easiest answers. Now let's connect this to another question that came up repeatedly. Will these plants actually work where I live? While no plant is perfect for every situation, coneflower has built a reputation for adapting to a wide range of growing conditions. That's one reason it appears in so many gardens across the country. Not because it's demanding, but because it's relatively forgiving, and forgiving plants are often the ones that stay around long enough to become true long-term investments. If your goal is to create containers that attract pollinators while reducing the need for constant replacement, coneflower deserves a place on your shortlist. And that brings us to the final plant on today's list. A perennial that proves flowers aren't the only way to create a beautiful container. Coral bells. Many gardeners focus almost entirely on blooms, but some of the most valuable container plants earn their place because of their foliage. That's exactly where coral bells shine. Instead of relying on flowers for a few short weeks, coral bells provide color, texture, and visual interest for much longer periods. And in many cases, that's even more valuable than a brief flowering display. Another advantage is versatility. While several plants on today's list prefer full sun, coral bells offer an excellent option for gardeners dealing with partial shade. That's important because one of the biggest challenges in container gardening is matching the right plant to the right location. A great plant in the wrong place rarely performs well. The right plant in the right place can thrive for years. That's one reason coral bells continue to grow in popularity. They fill a role that many other perennials simply can't. And once established, they continue providing value long after annual plants would have needed replacement. Which brings us back to the idea that started this entire list. If there's one thing all 7 of these perennials have in common, it's long-term value. Lavender, Hosta, Sedum, Daylily, Catmint, Coneflower, and coral bells. Each one brings something different to the table. Some thrive in full sun. Some perform beautifully in shade. Some attract pollinators. Some multiply over time. Some handle drought with ease. But all of them help accomplish the same goal, reducing the need to start over every spring. That's what makes perennials so appealing in the first place. Instead of buying new plants year after year, you're building containers that can continue rewarding you season after season. And as many gardeners eventually discover, success isn't just about choosing a perennial. It's about choosing the right perennial for your conditions, the right amount of sunlight, the right drainage, and the right location. Get those things right, and many of these plants can provide years of beauty with surprisingly little effort. That's the real meaning behind plant once, done forever. Not that a plant never needs attention, but that one smart decision today can continue paying off for many growing seasons to come. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.